Are y'all out there, coast to coast? If you are visiting with us tonight, outlines on this one and the one in the center, it'll be number 9, the dinner invitation. So welcome you to get those and follow along. I want to just kind of talk us into the lesson tonight, and we're going to read in a little bit Proverbs chapter 9. And I want to just do a little bit of explanation, a little bit of background in terms of kind of what and why we're doing tonight. We had a class at Eastside on Thursday mornings, and I think I did 30 lessons on topics from Proverbs. I had a friend that taught a class on wine, women, work, and worry from Proverbs. And you can just take a whole group of different topics and do that. But what I've chosen to do, obviously, is spend most of our time in the first 9 chapters. And because there's a foundation, there's a paradigm, there's a lens that is given to us in these first 9 chapters that I think then becomes kind of the basis to read the rest of the book of Proverbs. A brief apology, I will do more reading to you tonight than I normally do. And with my wife being a special education teacher, she says, I can read, please do not read to me in public. I learned how to read, and I say, I understand that. But we're going to do that. And a part of the reason is, and this is to me just the beauty of lifetime study, through the last couple of weeks, some things have just kind of connected and gelled, and it's taken a long time for this one to come together. And I've told Sheila, I said, sometimes like writing a bulletin article, it's like the tide, it just comes in and it flows, and this is a generational thing. Sometimes I feel like Fred Flintstone with a hammer and a chisel trying to carve out a letter at a time. It just won't quite come, and you just have, and that's been this lesson. And when it finally came together, I thought, okay, thank you for the opportunity to work with this class, because what we're going to do tonight will influence the way that I read the book of Proverbs for the rest of my life. And so we're going to do kind of a little more perspective and background things. And yes, we're going to finish with chapter 9. But I've entitled this the dinner invitation. And what we're going to have is that, and we've done this in several different ways, there's like this huge parentheses, these first 7 verses of chapter 1, first 7 verses give us kind of this introduction and these wonderful words, understanding, discernment, insight, knowledge, and the different people who may benefit from this, including young men, the simple, and even the wise. And then as we kind of walk through these first 9 chapters, then we're going to have, again, something very similar to that, except the final metaphor is going to be, and we've called her primarily Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly, are going to have a banquet. They're going to have a dinner. And in the case of Lady Wisdom, she is going to send out maidens out into the street to the simple ones and just say, hey, come eat with us. Are we okay for say y'all come? Understand kind of the expression from that. But that's going to be the first part of chapter 9. And Lady Wisdom is going to send out messengers to say, everything's ready. You know the song, all things are ready, come to the feast. Then there's going to be kind of an interlude, which is going to then use some of those same words from that first 7 verses. And then Lady Folly is going to have invitations for a meal as well. And so chapter 9 then is going to conclude with these 2 women. And we use the word personified, the way of life, the spirituality, then, and I mean this to be a pun, is given to us through the figures of 2 women. But as we do this, and I'll just do this real quick, we got married in between our junior and senior year. We're working with a church at Nakoma Park, and the preacher was released we got married in June, and the preacher, well, I'll just say was fired in April. And so I took 20 hours that summer and was preaching twice on Sunday and doing 2 Bible classes. So I had a lot of free time and not a whole lot, going on. And in the midst of all of that, as we got married, Barbara and Randy Heath, track coach, left managing the married student apartments, and they just said, would you guys like to manage, and we just had one at that time, the married student apartment, for free rent, okay? You're a newlywed, you've got another year of school, how does free rent sound? And so we took on the responsibility of 24 apartments, and you don't want to know all that happened, but it was just, we earned our money. I'll just leave it at that. Well, the dean who made the final decision had also preached in the state of Oregon, where my granddad's brother was an elder, and we had invited Larry Rhodes to come have dinner with us, just to say thank you. Well, with Mom and Dad being on the farm, we literally killed the fatted calf. They had brought stuff from home. So Sheila had fixed T-bone steak, special green bean casserole, corn off the cob, green salad, homemade rolls, and coconut cream pie. I have trouble remembering food items, but this was in 1973. And so that's what dinner was. And we got everything ready, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and we're headed toward 9:30. And we had tried to call and got no answer. Well, if you know the area, Oklahoma Christian, go past Brahms, go over the hill, and when you come to Coltrane, there's now a light. At that light, someone hit him between 70 to 90 miles an hour from the south, drove him across the road, across the lane, and pinned him next to some trees by that church there. And that's why we hadn't heard from him. He's out just colder than a cucumber, and at 9:30, he sets up on the emergency table, and he says, Doris, have we called the Hartmans and tell them we might be late tonight? And she says, well, ladies, just imagine, you got this call and your husband's in the ambulance and we hope he's going to live, but he's in a coma and all this other stuff. And she says, well, as a matter of fact, we haven't called them. And he said, well, I'd appreciate it if you do that. And then he laid down and was out for 2 more days. And just like 9:30 at night, he sits up on the bed and just says, have you called the Hartmans to tell them we're not going to come? Well, we've waited and waited and waited and waited. And we ate a little bit, and then Sheila said, do you think you could go out on campus and find some single college guys to come finish this meal? And I went out, and if you knew the Mark Braswell guys, these were all guys from Canada. I found 4 of the Canadians. And you think, if you're that far away from home-cooked meals and mom, and at 9:30 or 10 o'clock someone says, hey, would you like to come help us eat a homemade, home-cooked meal? And literally, by the time I got all the way back and everything, there was nothing left. If you just turn on an industrial vacuum cleaner and go, it was just, and it was delightful. Even we're going to look at, just briefly, send out messengers and come to my banquet. Oh, well, I can't come. I've gotten married. Oh, I can't come. I've just got an oxygen. They all begin to make excuses. And I've oftentimes thought we would so much have appreciated, and Larry Rhodes had told his wife, if you're the dean of students, you deal with all kinds of disciplinary problems. And he said, wouldn't it be nice just to go have a meal with somebody and there's no discipline involved? And he never was the same. He lived, but he never totally ever recovered from that. But can you imagine what 4 college guys look like? It's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but they just inhaled the whole meal. But what happens when you have a meal? There's just kind of this interaction, there's this communication, there's this relationship that goes on. And so these 2 women, as we kind of do this end of our introduction to Proverbs, then send messengers out and say, y'all come. We prepared a meal, and this gives us kind of the final metaphor for this last part of chapters 1 through 9. So here's a quick review. Number one, wisdom's personified and contrasted in the figures of two women, Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly, and I consciously use the word soliciting, and for very different purposes, but both of them are out soliciting to engage others in their lifestyle. And here's the sample, Lady Wisdom. She's in public places, making her appeal to anyone who will listen. And so here's our introduction from chapter 1. Wisdom cries aloud in the street. In the market, she raises her voice. At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out. And at the entrance of city gates, she speaks. And again, personification. Here's Lady Wisdom calling, especially the young men and the simple, come listen and come be a part of our life and our lifestyle. You come to chapter 8 and verse 1. Does not wisdom call, and does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights beside the way, and at the crossroads she takes her stand, and besides the gates in front of the town, and at the entrance of the portals, she cries aloud. I was just thinking about this last couple of days. While we were students, twice we went to Belize, British Honduras, on a campaign. And, we're semi-tropics and steamy and hot, and we had 3 or 4 Bible studies every day for the 3 weeks we were there. But one day we just sat down on the steps of the post office. We're trying to climatize, and we're the heat and everything else. And we sat down, and of course we had our Bibles, and this older gentleman came up, and he said, are you folks Christians? And I said, yes. And he said, Christians don't sit on the steps of the post office. Other people who are soliciting sit on the steps of the post office, but Christians don't sit on the. I said, "Oh, thank you." And we're gonna get up because we're in another country. We don't know what the custom is. If you are soliciting, then you could go sit on the steps of the courthouse, and that part of things we weren't there for, so we needed to get up and literally move. And so, what is wisdom doing? She is out in public places, the head of the street, doing everything she can to call people to come in. So when we come to chapter 9, and if you have that, and my Bible has 3 sets of paragraphs. When we come to chapter 9, and they're equally divided, the first part is going to be the way of wisdom, and it is kind of the summary and the bringing together of all the things that we've had with Lady Wisdom through the first 8 chapters. And then there's going to be, and I just use the term summary instructions, and we're going to hear some echoes all the way back to the very first paragraph. And then the way of folly, and Lady Folly is going to have her chance to say something. But if you notice this, just before we read this, both women prepare a meal, and in Proverbs 9:1, wisdom has built her house. And last Sunday night, a wonderful section from Psalm 127, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. And look at all the discipline and the constructive things that is happening. Lady Wisdom has built a house. This says, hewn her 7 pillars. And 7 probably again is this complete, the 7 days of creation, 7 is this holy number. And the house is described in this kind of holy and godly way. She has slaughtered her beast. She has mixed her wine. She has set her table. She has sent her young women to call from the highest places in the town. And this is kind of the summary. This is what Lady Wisdom's done. She's got all the meal prepared. Everything's ready. And then she's going to send the maids out and going to say, if we can use our term, y'all come. The meal's ready. But look at the contrast. Lady Folly is loud, forward. We could use the aggressive. But she just sits at the door of her house. Well, half step back. She is seductive and actually knows nothing in terms of spiritual things. She also takes a seat at the highest places of the town, and she is going to call to those who pass by and those who go straight on her way. So we're going to read chapter 9 and notice these 3 different sections. And as we kind of bring in this parentheses from chapter 1 to chapter 9. Here's how this opening section of Proverbs finishes. And there'll be some repeats, but just listen to the way of wisdom. Wisdom has built her house, 9:1. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her beast. She has mixed her wine. She has set her table. She has sent out her young women to call from the highest places in the town. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. To him who lacks sense, she says, and here's the invitation. And just so I don't forget it, a little bit later, there are quotation marks in our newer translations at various places through these first, especially 9 chapters, a few later, but particularly here. And this is a part of this personification in that wisdom is going to be given a voice and is going to speak. So what does she say? Come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and live, and walk in the way of insight. And this is going to be the call and the invitation from Lady Wisdom. And then in the middle of this, we have kind of a summary. And here is one of those things that all of us need to develop a sense of wisdom about. We had read one earlier, and I think it's from chapter 24. And the verses back to back say, speak to a man, and the other one says, don't. And a part of wisdom is, and this term scoffer is used. But do you remember as the book of Psalms opened, how does it open? Happy is the man, walks not in the counsel of the wicked, or stands in the way of sinners, or sits in the seat of the scoffers. And who are scoffers? There are people who just kind of ridicule and laugh at spiritual things. And so, whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse. Whoever reproves a wicked man incurs injury. Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Give instructions to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. And here comes our motto from chapter 1 and verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. For by me your days will be multiplied, and years will be added to your life. If you are wise for yourself, and if you scoff, you alone will bear it. And look again to contrast the scoffer and the wise man. And to one, can we use Jesus' statement? Don't throw your pearls before pigs. And there's some people, if they're just going to laugh and ridicule, and again, the discernment, which one is which. But if you rebuke a scoffer, he's not going to appreciate it, and he'll just laugh at you and continue scoffing. So, in the same way that Lady Wisdom has 6 verses, then here's Lady Folly to kind of finish this section. The woman Folly is loud. She is seductive and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. She takes a seat on the highest places of the town, calling to those who passed by and who are strayed on their way. And again, here's her soliciting. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. And to him who lacks sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. Now, before we read the last line, what is the contrast in the 2 invitations? And even just look at the meal. What has Lady Wisdom done? The house has been built, the preparation has been made, the food has been prepared, the wine has been, she's done all this stuff. And Lady Folly says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. And just look at the contrast, both in the thinking and the lifestyle of the 2 ladies. And then Wisdom says in verse 18, he does not know that the dead are there, and her guests are in the depths of Sheol. Next page. So when you look at this contrast between these women, this is on the back, Both of the women are seeking to entice their listeners to walk in their path. Both are soliciting others to join their lifestyle. Both women are inviting others to participate in their calling out. And both women have a totally different outcome for their lifestyle. So here's a quote. Both wisdom and folly make their final appeals, and both appeal to the simpletons, to those who need to live by wisdom but are most easily influenced by folly. Wisdom offers life with no mention of pleasure, and folly offers pleasure with no mention of death. Isn't that an interesting statement? Look at that again. Wisdom offers life with no mention of pleasure. Folly offers pleasure with no mention of life. So just before in chapter 8, wisdom was last seen as the director of work on the cosmic level. Remember, I was there daily beside him as a master workman as God created the universe. Now, she is portrayed among humans. Wisdom has prepared a house, established it on 7 pillars, and some will look at the inhabited world as described as that. She prepares a sumptuous banquet and sends maidens out to call the simple to come and eat. And, like I said, one of Jesus' parables, the dinner's ready, send people out. Mark, 2 or 3 months ago, was organizing an elder staff meeting and asked who could come. And for different reasons, everybody on the staff had a different reason, and they were good reasons that they couldn't come. And so I just quoted Luke chapter 14, verse 18. They all at once began to make excuses. And when you see Jesus sending out these men, I can't come. And think about this. You just got married, and you can't come and eat a feast with somebody else. I've just bought 2 oxen. I need to see how my oxen work. I've bought a field. Okay, everybody's different. And I, especially when I was dating, was not the kind of the adventurous and bold one. And, you're new on campus and didn't have a car and on, and just trying to find your way around. Who knows? Early October, I thought, okay, on Tuesday, I'm going to call and see if, who knows, Susie or Jane or whatever, will go out on Friday. Trying to be thoughtful and call ahead of time. So I called 3 girls, and the first one knew on Tuesday that on Friday she was going to be doing her fingernails and she couldn't come. The second girl knew that she was going to be washing her hair on Friday night and she couldn't come. And the third girl knew on Tuesday that she was going to be studying, and so she wouldn't be able to come. And so you hang up the phone and you think, these are the most organized girls I've ever been around in my life, that they know on Tuesday that they're going to be doing their fingernails, washing their hair, and studying on Tuesday night. So these are just the most organized girls that I've ever been around. Excuses, we hear them all the time. And so when the messengers are sent out, then there is going to be a call to see whether or not people will come to these different types of dinners. We're at number 4. The first 9 chapters of Proverbs is a carefully constructed contrast between the call and the consequences of listening either to wisdom or folly. And much of the rest of Proverbs, and you'll see these terms, proverbs, parables, sayings, and riddles, are very loosely connected. We don't have these extended speeches most of the time like we do in chapters 1 through 9. But 1 through 9 is a context and a foundation for this wide variety of all these different proverbs that follow. So here's the quote. The individual sayings that make up 2/3 of the rest of the book, and this author said, it's like a great stretch of pebble beach. To make one's way along would be more than daunting. It could be disorienting. And all that he's saying is that as we go into chapter 10 through the rest of the book, oftentimes every verse may be a different thought. There's not like there's a coherent speech or a presentation. They're just these little isolated jewels that are given in different places, but they then are kind of the commentary and the discussion about the consequences of either dining, going to the banquet with Lady Wisdom, her lifestyle, or dining and going to the banquet of Lady Folly. So here's number 5. Much of the rest of Proverbs are sentence sermons on the contrast between following these two choices that we're giving in the opening section. Wisdom wants to engage the whole man, the whole person, not only his power to think straight, but his management of affairs, his sensitivity to people, his character, his morals, and above all else, his relationship with God. And this is why the scoffer and those who are in that particular group are very clearly set aside. And I won't remember, maybe the second or third night, we use the term that there are people who are unteachable. They don't want to listen, they don't want to know, they don't want to hear, they don't want to have anything to do with it. They have their own lifestyle, their own pursuit of pleasure, and do not want anybody to rain on the parade. And that's the group of people that Jesus is going to talk about not casting your pearls before pigs. But notice this, the fear of the Lord is not a mere beginner's step in wisdom to be left behind, but the prerequisite for every right attitude. I had an extended conversation with a man this week who, over the years, has encouraged people to do Bible study and just says, let's read the Bible, let's read the Bible. I'm sorry. I'll try not to be too cheeky or sarcastic with this. But he said, a person came to him and says, what on earth are you doing? I read the Bible 4 years ago, and why should I read it again? And you just want to go, you did what? We're encouraging reading the Bible and learning and growing, and this person said, I don't know why you're doing this. I've already done that. I read the Bible 4 years ago. Why should I read it again? And you hear that tone of kind of the scoffer and the person who doesn't want to listen or doesn't want to learn. So, under the dotted line, number 1, wisdom is personified through these two figures. They are out soliciting, and they want others to become involved in their way of life. And each of them are making speeches that reveal their character and their view of life. For those of you and us who mark in your Bibles, I have a reading Bible I don't mark in, and then a study Bible. These verses are the speeches that are given in the first 9 chapters, and in your newer translations, when you come to 1:11, there will be quotation marks. And at 14, there will be quotation marks. And so in my Bible, I take a yellow highlighter, so when I'm reading through, then easily I can come to this and see, like chapter 8, it's from verse 4 to 36 is just this long extended speech. And this is a part of how the first 9 chapters are so different than these individual sentence sermons that come, because we have this dialogue and this personification and this speech. And so if you either circle or mark in your Bibles, you can go through later and look at these. And now when I'm reading through, okay, I'm in this extended dialogue, this extended speech, either by Lady Wisdom or Lady Folly in terms of the consequences of that. So chapters 8 and 9 are a fitting climax to the opening contrast between wisdom and folly. To possess wisdom, a prize better than jewels, is not a mystical experience, but look at these words: truth, discipline, prudence, knowledge. And then in chapter 8, 6 through 9 again, here's this discussion about Lady Wisdom. The words noble and right and truth and righteous. And then here's the motto, the fear of the Lord. And that's going to be repeated in various ways. And in this case, is hatred of evil. And I hope this is a nice way to say this. Chapter 9 presses home the challenge and the fear of the Lord or the lifestyle of Lady Folly with the bold simplicity of a cartoon, sketching for us wisdom and folly as rival hostesses who invite us in their very different styles to rival feasts of life or death. And with that knife-edged choice, indeed with a shudder, for the man who chooses wrongly, this lonely prelude of the anthology of terse sayings that will follow brings the series this unforgettable conclusion. All he's saying is, when we finish this invitation in chapter 9, then we're going to have all of these different sayings that complement or contrast the lifestyle of Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly. So, Roman numeral 2, the final scene. A young, unsuspected man is walking along. He's confronted with a message from two totally different sources. And I think of this like a fork in the road or a T-junction where you've got to turn one way or the other. He must turn to the right or to the left, and voices from each of these choices is calling to him as he passes by. They are invitation to come to my place to dine, and the banquet is an invitation to learning. Wisdom is training toward life and development of moral character. When Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, probably about 1200 BC, the hero is trying to go home, and they were called the sirens, these ladies on the rocks who were appealing to him. And what did he tell them to do? Tie me to the mast, plug my ears, and don't let me be influenced by that. For us, and especially for our kids, how many voices are around us every day? Very subtly calling out in one way or another. And this is where I think of these two invitations, and we're listening to those all the time, and they're around us. But here's 2:2, and this is the significance as this starts coming together. Both wisdom and folly are inviting him to share a meal, and in the ancient Near East, to share a meal is a part of developing a relationship, and they are competing. And we notice this in 2:3. Wisdom has built her house on 7 pillars. The house is complete, it's appropriate, and this is a home or a world where individuals grow and learn and serve and love. And wisdom wants to build a house that is home to families who work together in harmony and love and community, and where each contributes to the well-being of others. And Lord willing, we will save this for the last night. My wife refers to this lady in Proverbs 31 as the mythological creature who does all of these different things, but it is again a personification of what does a house look like that is influenced by wisdom. And again, anticipate, this doesn't come through us in English, but when we come to chapter 31, 10 through 31, each of the verses starts with a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And you just stop and think, if you're writing something in English, how do you start X, Y, and Z? You see what I'm saying? An awful lot of thought had to go through this, and probably some planning and note-taking and other stuff, and there's others, parts of Lamentations, there's 1 or 2 Psalms, but this was sometimes a literary method that was used. And so anticipate, when we come to the final thing about the virtuous woman, then again, she is the personification of what a household looks like who has come to the banquet and has joined with Lady Wisdom. So here we are, the asterisk under number 2. Wisdom sends out young women to call from the highest places, and wisdom is going to support the instructions of the Father. Remember we talked about Daniel's son, listen, my son, over and over in this, my son, my son, my son is a repeat. And so Lady Wisdom is then going to support the instruction that the Father is going to continue to give to his son. And Lady Folly takes a high seat. She calls out, and she will seek to undermine and even negate the father's instructions. So, eternal consequences. The young man is going to make a choice. Will he dine in Lady Wisdom's house or Lady Folly's house? And see, that's why I think of this. A Y, a T junction, he has to do one or the other. And this is kind of how the ninth chapter ends, is that he comes in, and here are these two competing alternatives, two different voices. Come eat, come have a banquet, come be there. But what are they ultimately doing? The meal leads to a lifestyle. Evil companions do what? Corrupt good morals. And you can see how this progresses, that yes, it's an invitation, and yes, the maids are sent out, and yes, the invitation's there, and yes, the meal is there, but the meal is going to lead to more than that. And the meal will eventually lead to relationships, and relationships will determine a big part of which direction that they go. Will he choose the fear of the Lord or pleasure? Will he choose life or death? And we said this early, when you read a proverb, oftentimes line A will interact with line B, and as soon as you come to chapter 10, all but maybe 6 of them will have the word but, by way of contrast. And here are some quick samples. 10:7, and I think of my mom and dad every time I read this. The memory of the righteous is a blessing, but the name of the wicked will rot. 10:12, hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. The fear of the Lord, 10:27, prolongs life, but the years of the wicked will be short. And so what do we have? The contrast of the two different lifestyles. And either commending both either the lifestyle or the consequences of that, and that's going to continue on all the way through the rest of the book of Proverbs. We have 3 paragraphs and we're done. So in chapters 1 through 9, which now I think of as an introduction to the whole book of Proverbs, this is the background for the rest of the book. And when you understand the structure, the purpose of the structure of 1 through 9, this lays the groundwork for the life choices that each of us will have to make. And I will read the book differently now because I will be hearing these two voices calling to people to a lifestyle from the first 9 chapters as I read the verses as they go through the book. The seeming random statements, the rest of the book, are not isolated principles. And this guy said, I love this, a great stretch of Pebble Beach, just little individual things. They are a commentary in short, striking statements, seeking to either encourage those who walk with Lady Wisdom. They seek to support the life-changing decision to walk in the fear of the Lord, and a warning, if they would listen, to those who walk with Lady Folly of the serious eternal consequences of that relationship. Last couple of paragraphs and we're done. Thank you for hanging with us tonight. The 2 invitations, woman wisdom and woman folly, they point forward to, again, the sentence literature, which will set forth a more detailed description of the boundaries of the way of righteous and the way of the wicked. If one chooses the banquet of wisdom, then one follows the path of learning and growing and moral development, and it is a nutritious meal that leads to a healthy life. And let me just say this very quickly, and this is even still hard to read, but what is the one topic that is talked about more than anything else in the first 9 chapters? The seduction of sexual relationships outside the covenant. Through the years, I've had 3 really, really close friends, and let's just say got involved with the secretary. And over a period of time, left children, left the original wife, entered a whole different way of lifestyle. unbelievable consequences. It didn't happen overnight, but what happens? All through our lives, we come to these intersections, we come to these T-junctions, we come to a relationship, and we will have to make the choice, which one of these are we going to follow? And so much of what is said in Proverbs is to encourage us to listen to Lady Wisdom, to listen to the fear of the Lord. 3:3. These Proverbs will seek to reinforce the virtue of choosing a relationship with Lady Wisdom while warning of the destructive consequences of a relationship with Lady Folly. These random proverbs are often sentence sermons instead of speeches or dialogues, but they should be read in light of the climax of chapter 9, which reveals that each of us will have to choose which house we're going to dine in. Each of us will have to choose which of these ladies we will walk with and share a relationship with, and the consequences of that choice, life or death, is illustrated and reinforced by the principles and proverbs that are taught in the rest of the book. The very first night we said the books of poetry commend in poetical form what the law commands. But when I read Proverbs, I also think Proverbs is a commentary on the motto, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom instruction. That's chapter 1 and verse 7. And then here's our final parentheses for this opening section in 9 and verse 10. As we close this opening section, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. So each of us, for the rest of our life, and especially each of our children, are going to hear two voices. Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly are all going to be saying, y'all come eat at my house, come be with us, come enjoy what we're doing. And the decisions that we make when we come to that intersection will determine our eternal destiny.